I am ready.
Hope you're ready for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. How do you create an oil and gas content for podcasting?
You can tell us that.
Thank you so much. That's a great question.
That's all I have is a great question.
Awesome. Well, allow me to present to you a presentation deck that answers your question, surprisingly. I just happen to have
You
it.
already have that ready.
I had no idea. Kismet.
Energy communicators, please.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Name is Yoshi Pradhan. My legal name is Yogashri Pradhan, but a lot of people don't know how to pronounce that. So on podcasts, on social media, I work professionally. I tell people to call me Yoshi. When I first came to the ECAPA meeting last month with Chris giving the presentation on some of the best practices for running a podcast, I was thinking to myself, well, I wanted to provide some perspective and a little bit of an interactive, like blank slate, to where I want the podcast experts to help me write the next page of the journey that I have. But let me show you the story first of how I got started and what's the present looking like, and then what the future is going to look like on how to create oil and gas content for podcasting. I want to give a lowdown about myself. We didn't do a bio at the very beginning of this presentation, so I'm just gonna give you a little bit about who I am and what I do professionally. Midland native. A lot of people say that if you live longer than a couple of years and doing an expat assignment in Midland, you're considered to be a local. I really grew up in Houston, but I've lived in Midland for about 8 years. There's a lot I can describe myself on. When I was in the 5th grade, we were given a list of 40 words, a whole page of how to describe ourselves, and we were supposed to pick a fraction out of those 40 words. I picked 39 out of those 40 words to describe myself, and I think it was then I realized I'm a multifaceted person. So this is a reference of how much of a multifaceted person I am. I mean, this is something that I'd like having written on my tombstone if my tombstone has a lot of space. So I'm a wife, a daughter, a recent Catholic. You can say that I'm a Jesus freak. I'm an engineer, I'm a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber. I did a bodybuilding competition last year. I love to write. There was one point in my life I wanted to be a children's author. So now I write technical papers. So I like to say I'm a creative. I operate a lot on my right side of the brain compared to the left side of the brain compared to other engineers. Technical author, public speaker, fitness trainer, and then dabbling into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a little bit. Yeah, I'm dabbling into that. I'm starting to make some deals in the Permian where if I don't get the job done or if I don't close the deal, you can fight me on the mat. All the experiences that I've done have been relative to the Permian. Currently work for Chevron, started last year, been working for Chevron for about 1.5 years. Worked for a number of operators in the Permian in Midland, particularly like Coterra, and I specify what kind of basins I'm working on because they're sub-basins as we talk technical in the Permian Basin. A lot of people like to do the blanket term Permian and say Midland, but if you talk to an engineer like myself, we're gonna start asking a lot more questions. So for example, where in the Permian? Is it the Midland Basin, so where we are in Midland County, Midland, Texas? Or is it the Delaware Basin? So you think of Culberson County, you think where Guadalupe Peak is, kind of that area. Then I've also worked for Endeavor Energy Resources. That brought me back out to Midland in 2018. Met my husband, got married in 2020. I got married at a pump jack, so on a lease. So that's a fun trivia fact that I like to give like whenever you get asked for fun facts. I worked for University Lands. So for those of you who don't know what University Lands is, there's lands that are leased to over 280 operators in the Permian. The royalties that get produced, the production that gets produced on those lands, those royalties fund University of Texas and Texas A&M school systems. So there's some lucrative business that when it comes to the oil and gas industry, and that's a little bit of what I want to talk about in terms of the content to generate in the oil and gas industry. How do we spread a positive message on oil and gas production, especially when it funds education? And then my very first gig, full-time gig, like paid full-time salaried gig was Devon Energy, where I worked in Midland. Brought me out here in 2015. And then I worked in the Central Basin platform in Midland Basin, and again, all different sub-basins in the Permian Basin, and I won't get too technical on that. Education-wise, recently got my MBA from Chicago Boot School of Business, and I did the part-time program where I would fly to Chicago every week from Midland. And there's no connecting flight, so I'll let you marinate on that a little bit. I did get a master's at Texas A&M University in 2020, and then I did get my bachelor's in petroleum engineering in 2015. So 3 degrees, a lot of people, I had someone ask me yesterday, what are you going to do with all these degrees? And honestly, I like to learn a lot. I didn't even think that far of like, a lot of it is teaching. A lot of it is, there's something that has inspired me in terms of trying to solve a problem in the industry. And that's what drove me to get the degree to help solve that problem. So I wanted to learn more about the oil and gas industry and be a contributor as a petroleum engineer, and wanted to solve some innovative problems because that's how the oil and gas industry was sold to me as a high schooler. So that's how I got the bachelor's degree. Then there were some technical problems in the industry, like how do we get the most production out of the ground? Like what's the way to produce all that oil and gas out of the ground? That's why I got the master's. Then I started asking the question, how do you effectively run a business? How do I start my own business? How do I run a bunch of side gigs, which I do with my full-time job? That's how I got the MBA. So that helped, the questions drove me to get the education in the hopes to come back and apply. And now I'm working on the side. I do more side gigs. I work as an adjunct professor at the University of Texas of the Permian Basin in petroleum data analytics. And then as of today, I got an offer to teach at TCU's Energy MBA program as an adjunct professor for business in energy finance. Okay, I said a lot of things about myself, but let's talk about podcasting. Why in the world did I start? If I'm working a full-time job, if I'm very comfortable where I'm at, if I have a comfortable gig, why am I pursuing these side gigs? I'm the last person to admit that I'm an entrepreneur. No one's ever everyone told me that. I was in denial. But now I've come to accept that I do have an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think some of these things where you feel misunderstood on a 9-to-5 job, where you feel that a 9-to-5 job may not be enough, where you feel you need a little bit more of a purpose, those were some of the reasons why I wanted to start a podcast. I love communicating. I competed in a speech team throughout high school and in college. So I did competitive public speaking. So I know how to communicate in front of people to some extent. So I wanted more fulfillment in life. I needed a sense of purpose. I felt underappreciated and undervalued in my 9-to-5 job because I didn't operate like the traditional introverted engineer who cared about working the 9-to-5 hours. I love education and I love educating others. So I love to talk because that retains a lot of the information that I've learned. I'm good at public speaking. I'm good in front of a camera. I'm confident in what I know, but I also know that I don't know a lot. And then I have a desire to serve. My husband says I have a savior complex, so I need to reel it in at times. So every time there's a problem, I always feel like I need to solve it. So how did I start? It was pretty simple. I actually started out with a YouTube channel in March of 2021. And I felt, okay, well, let's share more technical content. I got the communication skills, I got the technical chops. Let's put it together and communicate it. That way people can get a better understanding about why I get excited about solving engineering nerdy problems. So on YouTube, I did technical paper reviews. I would give advice on how to get a job in oil and gas. I felt, hey, I've been laid off twice in my first 3 years of my career. Maybe I can give some advice on how to survive a layoff or how to move on, how to navigate a job change. In fact, that's what I'm going through right now. My company right now is going through a reorganization, and now I'm working on how to navigate that. And the good news is I got more years under my belt than I did at 1 year and then at 3 years, so I can be more sustainable. But at the same time, I gotta find something to keep me going. So I also like sharing personal experiences to the point where I even overshare. And it could be funny, but it might not be. Then in October 2021, I thought, okay, well, I thought podcasting was a trend. I thought, there's so many podcasts out there, but I thought there was a gap that I wanted to fill. Or again, I'm an engineer. I like to communicate. I work for an operator. That builds my technical credibility. That shows that I have some insider information, even though I don't disclose insider information, but I have a perspective. I live it. So I'm like, if I live the engineer comfortable life, but one who likes to do a lot of side gigs, well, might as well make a podcast about it. So I thought to myself, okay, well, how do I make information consumable? So I thought, well, there's some heavy literature out there, and if I were to break it down like a Cliff's Notes, then maybe people might listen to me. So that's why I did technical paper reviews. I would read a paper that's like a journal reviewed or peer-reviewed journal paper. I would read a conference paper. Then what I would interview the author of the paper, like a book club kind of deal, to ask about the motivation behind the paper. It made the author feel really comfortable because they wrote the content and they can talk about the paper all day until the cows come home. But then I thought to myself, well, that might be too dense. To some extent, that could be too dense. Some people may not like to listen to a lot of technical information. My husband even told me that he doesn't listen to my own podcast because the information's too dry. And he likes listening to tangents. So I thought, well, there's some trends in the oil and gas industry, for example, in that a lot of people like to hear stories. How did CEOs climb the corporate ladder? How did people become leaders and thought-provoking, maybe even controversial people in the oil and gas industry? So I thought, okay, well, why don't we interview technical people, the people who don't get that limelight, the people who don't usually are not thought of for the spotlight. They're nerds. How do we highlight the nerds? Then I started interviewing technical stories. The PetroPapers Podcast is where I did a lot of research about these authors. And when I did a lot of research about those authors, I started asking them about their stories and how they get to where they got and to share their passions. That's where the PetroPapers Podcast started becoming more of a, let's talk about technical leadership, not just about papers. Then I started thinking about more needs to fulfill. So this is where you get more content as far as inspiration goes for oil and gas people. What do people care about in oil and gas? They care about, well, it really does depend on the audience. Like my husband, for example, likes to listen to tangents along with history and likes to get some information, but he's there for entertainment. So I like to tell how to survive. I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you think about your physical, like your physical needs, where it's sleep, or if it's hunger or thirst, and then you go all the way up to self-actualization. One of my biggest mistakes is when I started the podcast is I went to the top rather than starting from the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy. So part of how to survive with respect to oil and gas industry and security is how to get a job, how to network, how to maintain a job, and then how to stay relevant. Podcast is supposed to give you some information on how to, consuming that information so you can apply that later, whether if it is entertainment or whether if it is trying to share that information with someone else. First, about thirst. Once you teach people how to survive, then you can teach people how to thrive, how to get a promotion, how to upskill, where to upskill, learn how to mentor, how to sponsor. Some people want to feel empowered. And then you learn from the experts. You want to get the biggest names on your podcast. Like I want to get Daniel Yergin on my podcast. Christian wants to get Daniel Yergin on his podcast. And for those of you who don't know who Daniel Yergin is, he wrote The Prize and The Quest. Those are the oil and gas history books that everyone needs to read to get a better understanding of the industry and where we are and where we're going in the future. Because I'm an engineer, I like to talk about case studies. I want to bring everyone's attention to talking about my podcast and my genuine review of it, being very transparent. PetroPapers. I love alliteration, so when I start the podcast, I say, welcome to the PetroPapers Podcast. And then I challenge people to say that 10 times really fast. The case study is the technology that I use. So let's start with the logistics. And I know Chris is going to be really mad at me because I don't invest into the greatest equipment because it really was a side gig. I really wanted to make it as a hobby. But if I want to take it seriously, I know for a fact that I need to invest in it seriously too, not just the time. Phone, camera, and I do have a microphone that may not be the laptop. I do have a big microphone. And then in 21 to 2024, like I said, I was interviewing technical authors of papers like a book club. And then I asked detailed questions, which again, the style of it was really dry. It's like an audiobook. Some topics did better than others. Some people like the trendy topics. Other people don't like the obscure topics that I like to talk about. So then in 2023 to 2024, I started interviewing technical leaders in the oil and gas industry. The untapped technical, the stories, the people who deserve the limelight. Other career avenues like alternatives to the climbing the career ladder. How can you still be satisfied as an individual contributor throughout your entire career? You don't need to have a spicy title or the spicy corporate ladder that you're climbing. You could have a general comfortable career and be happy with it, feel fulfilled. So then the question that I was trying to reach out to is casting a wide net to a larger audience, because the majority of the larger audience is the common man. So what does the common man want? That was the question I was continuing to ask myself. It's hard to read on the camera, but I wanted to show you my analytics. Again, this is very transparent, where the most popular videos of all time ended up being the one that had the greatest production from digital wildcatters. It had the greatest video quality. It had the most raw conversations. It was the tangents that my husband yearns for when he listens to the podcast. It's the entertainment along with the education component. I over-indexed on the education component to where I didn't think about making it fun, because I thought the dry stuff was fun and I might be different. But then the other thing that made people interested was talking about that was been the most played of all time. Was talking about research and people's technical stories. Then it was stories that came first before actual papers. Everything that says technical leader specifies that these were stories that people wanted to hear, tangents that people wanted to follow, the choose your own adventure people wanted to listen to, the words people selected. So that's when I realized that that's probably the content that people are really looking for. They want to hear your story. They do want to hear what the common man has to say, but they want the entertainment component with it too. They wanted the scenic route. So I do have PetroPapers actually reaches about 40 countries. There are 40 countries that listen to my content. Most of them are oil and gas countries, and because it's in English, most of my listeners are from the United States or from North America. And then funny enough, I guess because I am Indian, I get a huge audience from India. And then because my content is oil and gas, I have some people from Saudi Arabia, Norway, and the United Kingdom. So I do have a reach of a few continents for the countries and regions. And then the content trends represent how often I release those podcast episodes. Again, I do this as a hobby. It ebbs and flows in my life to where the more often I put out that content on a regular cadence, then the more listeners you will get, or the more engaged followers you will have. So what I've been starting to do is called, and I'll talk about it more later, but I realized I had a hack for myself in order to keep the listeners going. My weakness is I'm a one-woman show when it comes to the podcasting, and I don't invest much in my own equipment, and I'm the first one to admit that. Everything I do is remote whenever I do interview. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I live in Midland and a lot of my guests are in Houston, Denver. And I realized that Digital Wildcatters, for example, requires people to come to their studio, like fly over and do the interview at their studio, because that brings quality production. And I totally get that. And I realized that based on my own analytics, I had someone record it for me at a different studio to get some of the best hits of all time. So time, my recording is in fits and starts. When I started 2021 and 2022, prior to the MBA, I would have an episode a week. I would have a guest. I kind of like meal prep. You would record for a number of weeks and then you just you start releasing those episodes, people start engaging, people understand when you're going to start dropping things. I know that to an extent that I have not found my sweet spot, and I think a lot of it has to do with is I live the experience of a petroleum engineer in a cyclical industry where my primary stream of income comes from a company where I don't do this as my full-time job. And I'm not trying to make it as an excuse. I'm providing an explanation as to why my sweet spot has been from 2021 to today. I changed companies 2 to 3 times, I think 2 times. So the company that I started with, that I started PetroPapers Podcast, is a completely different company to where I'm today. I have a different perspective. I'm on a different payroll, for crying out loud. And the other thing I want to mention is that I'm the first of its kind in terms of being an engineer, working for an operator, and being a woman of color. Like, if you want to throw all these qualifiers out there, I'm one of its kind. I'm a lone ranger in doing this, so people don't really have a set expectation of what excellence looks like unless it meets a certain need, and that is something that I'm navigating. But I'm done with beating myself up in terms of not being the perfect podcaster. I do know what I bring to the table, which I know I have the potential to be successful at. I am a domain expert. I'm not somebody that majored in communications. I majored in petroleum engineering twice. Then I got a business degree. And now I want a PhD. So I really just don't stop. I am a public speaker. I can talk in front of people. I can talk in front of a camera. I'm doing a podcast. I ask really deep questions. And I can drive people really crazy. I have social media influence. I say some because it's not on all platforms. I have 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. Not a lot of engineers have 30,000 followers on LinkedIn that work for a number of Permian operators. I just have a big presence and I have an influence as someone who lives the experience of an engineer in Midland. I have a lot of passion. I have a lot of passion about what I do. If I didn't have a passion of what I do, why would I be masochistic and pursue another degree in petroleum engineering, pursue an MBA in a location that is not local to Midland? And then I am not afraid to be imperfect. In fact, I just wanted to get an episode out just to see how things would react. We talked about perfectionism in the last month's ECAPA meeting. And with that being said, I felt comfortable in the fact that I'm imperfect, but I shouldn't stop there. There are trade-offs. There's time. It does take time to make a good podcast. It takes time to edit. And you can't duplicate yourself. You can hire other people, which I'm working on it. I have been rejected from job opportunities because of my digital presence. Not because I'm controversial, but the fact that I have a digital presence. The other final thing is, yes, I do want to monetize. I want to monetize my YouTube channel. I want to monetize my podcast. I get asked all the time, am I getting sponsorships from various companies? And I am limited to who I can get sponsors from, frankly, on the podcast, because that would show preference to a particular service company, and that is not in alignment with the operator that I'm with. So there are some things that my hands are tied on. But that isn't to say that I can't get sponsorships from other places. And then versus expenses. Yeah, it takes money to make money. Let's be real. What's next? I'm an engineer, so I like to talk about the problem. Now, the episode will be the solution, or talking about the solution. So let's address a problem that's happening in the Permian. And then I want to promote local businesses in how they provide solutions to solving that problem. And then I want to continue talking about technology because that is how PetroPapers started. And then I do want to continue talking about technical leader stories. And then I say, now that I joined ECAPA, I do want to make more time for podcasting. If I'm investing the time to talk about it, then I need to walk the walk or walk the talk. So then I would need to dedicate time of the week to plan and record and email a bunch of leads, which is what I do. A little bit each day, you grow something. 1% each day, you get something different than what you did at the beginning of the year. And now I leave a blank slate for you two, as the podcast experts. Like, what do you think I should do next? So that's a question that I want to leave to you all, that based on everything that I shared today, my history, the lived experience, the continuing lived experience, not coming out of the game and looking at a picture frame at its whole, being within the picture frame. What should I do next? But before you answer that question, this is where I want to see it. This is my vision. Because it took me some time to figure out how I see PetroPapers, how I see this podcast. I was Googling the top podcasts in oil and gas. And the funny thing is, there are a lot of people I don't even know on that list. They're great communicators. They're not engineers in the industry. What I also found surprising, that Flipping the Barrel wasn't even in the top 50. And these are people that have lived experiences in the industry. I do want to make money. Let's be real. Sponsors that are outside of oil and gas. I do want 1 million plays. Million sounds like a nice number, but I also want 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I like that gold plate. And then 1 million followers for all time. But that also leaves another question for you guys. You always need to reinvent yourself whenever you're growing. So I don't know where to pivot next, but I do know that I need to pivot somewhere to cast a wider net, to get more people, to retain more people. So we'll see. And that's it.
That was awesome. Thank you very, very much. That was killer.
Thank you.
Killer.
So let me ask you this. You're an engineer, and so addressing the problem is a joy for a lot of engineers. Your most played one was the Digital Wildcatters episode. So let's start there and work out.
Yeah.
What was that episode about? What are some factors? What is its length? Was it all in person? Was it like a Zoom call kind of an episode? Let's talk your setup.
My setup was an in-person episode. I happened to be in Houston on that day. He happened to be available on that day, John Kafalian. The topic of that episode really was meant to be on the importance of having field experience, the importance of being out there in the field, the importance of having that lived experience as an engineer, and how you can get it as someone who doesn't have any prerequisites. And John had a compelling story of him not coming from the industry, but and not even going to the biggest schools, but getting the degrees, doing the choose your own adventure when one person introduces you to something, then goes to some other thing. And then he now has a career in Digital Wildcatters. So it's the scenic route that is the career path that people love to enjoy and stay for the ride for. It was an hour long too. So people, even though they may not have listened to the entire episode, they listened to the episode.
Do you know what your duration was, average duration per listener?
Average duration per listener is about 5 minutes.
Okay.
For that episode?
No, for all of the episodes. For all the
that
episodes.
I think Chris
The longer the video.
Chris was trying to dial in specifically as a case on your Digital Wildcatters.
Sure.
Was the best one.
Yeah, let's focus on your success and let's
Yeah,
go
that
from
was
there,
5
right?
minutes
Yeah.
of listening time.
Okay.
Although, you know what's interesting about that was that, but it wasn't on your platform. Your best performance was on someone else's
That's his platform.
Right.
So, challenging you for your next step is take apart that episode. Look at what boosted. Was it Digital Wildcatters sharing it? Was it you sharing it? Was it the content that engaged people?
It was the combination.
It's
So
the combination. So now you've deconstructed all of this. You also said increasing quality, right? You know, there was a guy here last month who was bragging about quality boosts engagement. I don't remember who that guy was. I think that was me. But take it, run with it. Take those pieces. A podcast, any content at all, is a plant. You have to tend to it and you have to water it. Consistency, duration of time in that consistency, quality, and the subject matter, right? I am not someone who would listen to a podcast on peer reviews and papers, right? That's not what I listen to. But hearing an everyman story is what is going to engage me. So I would challenge you to jump in and do something that provides education for your listeners, because everybody is hungry for something, right? Educate your listener, but educate them in a way that doesn't make them feel unintelligent. And you'll grow from that.
Thank you. It's empowering them too. Yeah.
It was brilliant, Chris. It was brilliant.
I love that.
Well, and I think and to bring, because what Chris said was absolutely perfect, and you said it in a very like locomotive caboose kind of way. 1, 2. But the same concept I've heard, and I know that it's true, is that people like to hear from people that are just a couple of steps ahead of them, right? Like I used to listen to Grant Cardone 20 years ago, but I don't blame anyone today who looks at Grant Cardone and says, I can't relate, right? Because the guy's a multi-billionaire now. How is he going to teach me anything? He has no clue what my struggle in my life is. And you are really at a perfect point where, again, you may be on step 6 and you can describe everything up to that, up to step 6, and then tell people how you're going to go from 6 to 7. Because again, like Vaynerchuk says, don't create, document. And that's the easiest way to do it. Because also where everything now, like even YouTube has become so slick right now, we've gone to like YouTube 3.0 where everything is like highly produced, and rightfully so to a degree. But what it does now is it makes the yearning for authenticity, I think, even more. I think everyone says that, but they still look at the bullshit, right? But it doesn't matter, because if you keep doing it authentically and with consistency, run it, please.
The consistency piece, I think, is your audience needs to know when to expect you. That's the only thing that truly matters, right? So if you do one every 2 months and then 4 in a row, as long as you've got 30,000 followers. Yeah. As long as those people know, then you're okay, right? But if you drop one, hey, I just dropped one on Monday, like they're not prepared for that. Yeah. People will always kind of roll their eyes and scoff at the idea that says we need to prepare for content, but in genuine nature of the human action, we have to prepare for everything, right? Not a lot of us are the dive into something and just fucking figure it out kind of thing, right? So, like as an instance, look at television. Television over the last 70 years has been on Monday at 7 p.m. so-and-so and so-and-so episode of Law and Order is coming on, right? They've always prepared us. They've never dropped something a day before. It's always been advanced information, right? TV is dead, but internet thrives. Still the same function, still the same people watching. They've just moved locations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You know what? I would actually, on what you said, I would like to actually make a disclaimer on that. Because what I said about that was strictly 100% my perspective of what I am doing, and it doesn't even mean that my perspective of what I'm doing is correct vis-a-vis the audience. Maybe I am just very effing lucky that I am sporadic, but when I post, I get engagement, and maybe I'm confusing that with what I'm saying, and maybe I'm just, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't want to poison that. Because I do believe 1,000, so you're 1,000% correct, that people need to be primed to know when. Because again, I think that people really like to enjoy the things that they enjoy. Right? Like, and I have a feeling about the brand, and I have a feeling about what it makes me feel like. It's brilliant as shit.
One more thing I want to challenge you with. Yeah. You've got 35,000 followers. You got far more than I've ever seen on my personal social media. Just, I don't put any effort into my social media. I know social media works. I value social media. I personally do not have the patience for my own social media. If somebody hires me to manage their social media, I'll give them all my focus,
Yeah.
right? For my personal social media, piss it in the wind, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. But you've got 35,000 followers. What are you doing to market your podcast?
It's a great question.
As an MBA, what is your domination plan for your product?
Awesome.
That's a great question. I mostly use LinkedIn for my podcast, where anything I drop, I post it on LinkedIn.
So, what are you doing on LinkedIn?
I have a team actually that helps me with it too, but I don't. But that's different content, as in like it's written work, as opposed to actually marketing the podcast.
So, you've got 35,000 people who follow you, who are interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? They find value in the work that you put in. You have to find a way to speak to that 35,000 audience that you have
Yeah.
and make them want to listen to what you're saying on your platform, not just read what you're posting. So I challenge you to come up with a game plan and create your own domination plan to become that 1 million plays, the 1 million followers, and at the top of the list on Oil and Gas Podcast.
At the next meeting, come with your draft. I'm not playing. Come with the draft at the next meeting.
Okay. I'll do
Because
it.
if we're literally not holding each other, and look at this here, if we're literally not holding each other accountable to what you say you want to do, then why are we here?
Why are we here? Oh, yeah.
So,
Why are
let
you
me-
telling me stuff?
Start there.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able, I can't go to the CEO of Chevron's office or house at 9:30 at night and be like, hey, you want to do business with us? No, but I can do that on their phone because they're going to be scrolling on something at 9:30 at night, right?
I agree.
So I challenge you to take that same idea, digital focused domination plan, and come up with it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Just make a shell of it, make some outlines, and then allow us to help you grow that.
Thank you. That was the intent of this.
100%. No, and I love it because in some degree too, and what this basically is a mastermind. This is really what this becomes a mastermind. And I would actually love that, right? To give individual focus.
I appreciate you not using your term think tank.
No, I don't want to use those terms. But I do find this very, I think this is very useful.
Get into the merch side. If you've got 35,000 people that follow you, take 5% of that. We'll buy
Yeah.
you merch.
Right. And a hat at $25 that you can get made for 10.
Yeah.
Nah, dude, you're done. You're done. Different shtick.
Let's work with you and get the ball rolling to create the snowball effect on viewer growth.
Thank you. Much appreciated. This is gold.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That's it. Meeting adjourned. That's huge. Thank you. Dude, that's baller. And even,